Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet of Portsmouth City Council. My apologies for being late. The build of the Oktoberfest in Guildhall Square caused a slight problem. So thank you very much indeed. So I'm Gerald Van Jackson, I'm leader of the council and I chair this committee. Please be sure that we put appropriate cleansing and social distancing measures in place, which is why members are only sat where the green dots are in the council chamber. So we've included a request that all attendees have had a lateral flow test within the last 48 hours of the meeting and keep 2 metres apart and wear masks when not seated and use the one-way system in the Guildhall. Can people remain seated during the meeting, please? There's no fire alarm expected, so if one rings, it's real. Please meet by Queen Victoria. And sign out as you go. Let's quickly go round and do introductions of who is here and what their roles are. David?
David Williams, Chief Executive, and Queen Victoria may be incapacitated.
She is bronze.
Leader, I believe the meeting point is the turning circle at the end of the road down there.
Not according to this. It says Queen Victoria, and we meet at Queen Victoria. Christopher.
Chris Ward, Director of Finance.
Mr. Ashmore.
David Ashmore, Community Safety and Environment.
Lynn.
Lynn Stagg, Traffic and Transportation.
Susie Horton, Children, Families and Education.
Hugh Mason, Planning Policy and City Development.
Peter. Mr. Balfe.
Peter Balfe, City Solicitor.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Andy Biddle, Director of Adult Social Care.
Kimberly Barrett, Climate Change and the Green Recovery.
Ben Dowling, Cabinet Member for Culture, Leisure and Economic Development.
Darren Sanders, Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness.
Jace.
Gosh, that sounded crazy, didn't it? So I'll take the mask down. Councillor Jason Fazackley, Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Adult Social Care.
Peter Shelley, Transport Development Manager from the Public Transport Team.
Tristan Samuels, Director of Regeneration.
Okay, and we have one gentleman in the seats at the back. Do we need to identify who you are? Company lawyer for whom? For us, not First Bus or any dodgy other company. Okay, lovely, thank you. So we have 2 lawyers, one to keep an eye on each of them. Each. Okay, thanks very much indeed, folks. Now, in terms of apologies, I've got apologies from Councillor Chris Atwell, whose mum is coming out of hospital today, and he's got to be there to look after her. And I can think of no better reason not to be at a council meeting than looking after your mum. Any other apologies? Nope. Okay. Any declarations of interest, colleagues? Nope. Okay. Record of previous decisions. I just need to see if I can find the correct paperwork for this. Our last meeting, the audio didn't work, so it's not recorded. Anna, are we certain that the audio is working for this meeting? And they'll yell if we're not working. Okay. Now, if I can find the correct paperwork, which is a big if, which I have now failed to do, I had a list. Here we are, of previous things. Just for the record, I wanted just to go through and record what the decisions were at the last meeting. They are recorded in the minutes, but they're just to make sure that they're available on this. On something with where there is audio. In terms of recommendations from the Scrutiny Management Panel, we decided to appoint Councillor Kimberly Barrett to Eastney Area Community Association, to Frampton Community Association, Councillor Dave Ashmore, to New Theatre Royal Will Purvis, King's Theatre Trust, Councillor Hugh Mason and Rob Wood. Portsmouth Naval Base Property Trust, Terry Hall and Steve Pitt. In terms of appointment, other appointments made. Standing Advisory Committee for Religious Education, Councillor Ryan Brent. Port Advisory Board, Councillor Simon Bosher. Southern Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority, Councillor Jeanette Smith. Violence Against Women and Girls Task Group, Councillor Kirsty Meller. In terms of the Clean Air Zone, we went with the recommendations as suggested by the officers, which we approve. The making of the Portsmouth Clean Air Zone Charging Order 2021, the charging order, substantially in the form provided in Appendix A to the report, to take effect in time for the CAZ launch date of the 29th of November. Delegated authority to the Assistant Director of Transport, jointly with the Chief Solicitor or their delegate, to agree and authorise any non-material changes to the charging order prior to making, in consultation with the Leader and Cabinet Member for Transportation, Climate Change and the Green Recovery, Community Safety and Environment, and authorise the City Solicitor to seal and make the Portsmouth Clean Air Zone charging order, including any changes to the version of the order provided in Appendix A, as may have been necessary in accordance with Recommendation 2.2 above. Then in terms of discharge to assess unit at Harry Sotnick House, we agreed to the permanent transfer of the staff and related available budgets for the Victory unit to Harry Sotnick House, acknowledging that this will result in adult social care ceasing use at the Victory unit at Wiley Road. Number 2, agreed the Director of Adult Care consider and evaluate the options for the future use of space at Wiley Road. 3, acknowledged that it was possible to establish and operate a new discharge to assess unit within Harry Sotnick House at current capacity due to combination of both staff resources from the Victory unit and the funding available through the government temporary COVID hospital discharge scheme. Acknowledged that health and social care partners have an ambition to establish permanent 40-bed discharge to assess unit at Harry Sotnick House, and commissioning and this proposal would require joint commissioning with and permanent funding contributions from Portsmouth CCG. Agreed with the Director of Adult Social Care continuing negotiations to enter into the necessary agreements with health and social care partners in consultation with the Section 1.5 officer and the City Solicitor or their delegates to establish a permanently jointly funded and commissioned discharge to assess unit within the Harry Sotnick House. 2, operational funding arrangements to support people discharged from hospital who cannot be supported with a discharge to assess unit and require support from within the external care sector prior to the Care Act assessments being completed. Then we looked at the Greening Strategy Update Report and accepted that. Then we looked at the Housing Delivery Test Action Plan 2021 and agreed that the Housing Delivery Test Action Plan for 2021 attached as Appendix 1 to the report be approved for publication and implementation, and that the corporate plan for recovery and renewal and the decisions were approve the corporate plan, our plan for recovery and renewal. Noted the plan demonstrates the Council's commitment to the recovery and renewal of the city will be necessary post-pandemic to support and achieve the vision for Portsmouth being agreed with partners, and agreed that delegated authority be given to the Chief Executive to make minor changes to the draft document prior to publication. We then looked at the switched on Portsmouth Impact Report and noted and thanked colleagues for that. We then looked at the Revenue Budget Monitoring 2020-21 first quarter and made decisions that in terms of where that money was going. I'm not going to read them all out because they go on forever. Then we looked at the economic impact of the cruise business on the city and noted that report. We looked at the Portsmouth International Port Sustainability projects, including provision of shore power, and supported that. We looked at terms and conditions at the port and supported the recommendation. We then looked at service provider for the border crossing post. I, as leader, declared an interest and left that part of the meeting, but as it's just reporting what the decision was that I was not involved with, we agreed to hand that to Portico Shipping. We looked at regeneration of the city centre and to change the names from Lou Landport and Landport Gate, which nobody understands, to something more sensible. And looked at the compulsory purchase orders, which we then sent on to full council, which they then adopted. That was the record, but I think it's important that just for the audio, for anybody watching, that people know, and they can see the detail of the reports online with the minutes. Okay, item 4, impact of government legislation on COVID-19 vaccination requirement in care homes and adult social care approach. Andy Biddle, the floor is yours, Andy.
Thank you, Leader. So the paper in front of you talks about how the Council is complying with the change in regulations that all staff working in care homes and most visitors who will go into care homes are required to be vaccinated against COVID-19, both jabs, and this change comes into force from the 11th of November this year. There was an impact on 2 sets of staff in Portsmouth City Council and the wider social care sector, both those who work in care homes and those who visit care homes in the course of their work on a regular basis. So for our staff who work directly in care homes who we employ, we've offered written notification of the changes. We've offered quite comprehensive information about vaccination that's been publicly available and shared through Department of Health and Social Care and Public Health. And we've also provided quite a considerable opportunity for line management discussion where appropriate if we have people that are reluctant to take up the vaccine. When we drafted the report, those actions had seen the number of staff not double vaccinated reduced from 17 to 4 between June and the end of September this year. But as of the 19th of October, so last Tuesday, that had reduced further to 1 employee. So we've only got a single person working in our care homes who's declining vaccination, and we've made arrangements for them to be redeployed. The requirement for...
Andy, can I just check you... I missed that word. You made arrangements for them to be...
redeployed.
Thank you. I just wanted to be very clear. Thank you.
Maintain their employment. So the requirement for COVID-19 vaccination we're looking to incorporate into new contracts, and we'll be undertaking a consultation through acknowledged HR processes for all existing contracts to change. And we're in that process at the moment. And we've shared our approach to that regulation change with all of our independent sector providers as well, which carries on the tradition that we established through COVID of sharing all the resources that we came across with all of the social care sector in Portsmouth. For those who visit care homes in the course of their work, so a slightly smaller group of staff, we reviewed those on a case-by-case basis. We offered all the same information, discussion, line management support, and we found that in total that was affecting 3 employees, and we considered redeployment options for all of those staff members. We then concluded we may have a risk of some dismissal of staff based on our redeployment options, but I'm pleased to be able to tell you that since that time, since we drafted the paper, we won't have any dismissals. We've managed to redeploy those staff as well. So it's been quite an extensive process, thanks to HR and legal colleagues. Not always easy to implement things in the rapid pace that we've had to do it, but we've maintained employment stability for our staff, and we've been able to share information, resources, etc. with the wider social care sector within Portsmouth. And that's the broad body of the report, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Jason Fazakis, this is your portfolio. Anything you'd like to add?
Not a great deal to add, basically, to Chair Andy's detailed, basically, the progress that we've made since this became known that we'd have to have staff fully vaccinated. You can hear from what Andy said that we were down to literally a handful of people that we've had to redeploy, no job losses whatsoever. So I think it's a success story in that respect. I mean, there are various reasons people choose not to have the jab, whether they're apprehensive because they've seen some of the deaths, very limited deaths that have occurred through people that have had the injection, anti-vaxxers, scare stories. But at the end of the day, it's the individual's view whether they choose to have it or not. Government policy says they need to do it, so I think we've done a really pretty good job, and I'm glad that so many of our staff had the common sense actually to become vaccinated. So nothing really else to add. It's not for decision, just for noting. So good news story, I think.
Thanks very much indeed for that. This seems a sensible thing to do. One of the learning points out of the first part of the pandemic was that the number of people who did die in nursing homes from COVID were incredibly regrettable and devastating for families. And it was great to see in the previous cabinet meeting talking about the discharge to assess and the work that Harry Sotnick House have been doing in terms of an isolation unit to break that cycle of infection from people coming out of hospital with COVID and taking it into their care homes. Andy, can I just ask, the government has thought it sensible that everybody who works within the care setting in care homes has to be double vaccinated. What's the position in terms of the care for people in hospital?
Thank you. So locally we've had agreement and assurance from our local health partners that anyone that visits any of our care homes as an NHS employee will be double vaccinated. But nationally there was a consultation that closed last Friday, I think, the 22nd, that was talking about extending that requirement for all NHS frontline staff, and also about including the annual flu vaccination in that requirement as well. So whilst we were concerned that social care staff were being treated differently, I think the government then caught up in terms of that consultation, and so we'll likely to hear in the next fortnight to 3 weeks, I suspect, if there's a similar decision to amend regulations now.
Okay, it seems to me, if it's right for people working in care homes, how could it not be right for people working in hospitals and in other health settings? I think needs to be a level playing field. Okay, colleagues, are you happy with the recommendations that come forward from Andy on that? Okay, thanks much indeed. Moving on to Oak Dean and Loxway Road flats. Andy, this is you again.
Thank you. So the paper, slightly longer, it's got a bit more detail in it as to the process that we've been through. So it shows how the council's investing in enablement and recovery services for people with long-term mental health challenges in the city of working age. So our strategy as an adult social care function of the council is to prioritise a range of appropriate housing options for people with care and support needs, and to personalise that support to their own circumstances. So the paper gives details of how these aspirations led us to develop a service that helps our citizens move on from long-term residential care and develop skills and experience in independent living, gradually moving through to less intensive support in their daily lives as is appropriate to their needs and their abilities. So from 2015 we've been reviewing placements in long-term care and support for those people, working age folk with mental health problems, who we felt could move on to other available housing options. And so in 2017, having exhausted all of those options, we, together with our NHS partners, identified a need for a slightly higher level of support, albeit that interim, to enable folk to move on to other care options. So not quite as intensive as long-term care that they were in, but slightly more care than we had available to them at that time. So the Oak Dean Loxway Road site has been an example of co-production, which ensures that all of our citizens with care and support needs who are going to use that service, and those people who have used services like that in the past, are involved in the design of that service, how it works, the model of support, learning from them. They've experienced it, they're the experts in their situation. And enabling people, our citizens, to see how their involvement influences how that service is designed and how it's going to operate every step of the way. The model of contracting for the support service has enabled us to gain increased value for our citizens, and the service reflects our adult social care values and offers a personalised service to people. It also delivers on the National Community Mental Health Framework that was published in 2019. As you know, we've got a very long history of integrated working between the NHS and the Council in Portsmouth, and we feel that this service unites NHS Solent, NHS Portsmouth Clinical Commissioning Group and the adult social care function of the Council with a local service provider in working for our citizens with care and support needs, both to help them lead more independent lives, but also to gain value for money from the arrangements that we had in place for many of them. And that's the broad subjects of the report, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Andy. Jason, anything, again, your portfolio, anything you'd like to add?
And once again, Chair, not a huge amount to add, apart from to say Andy touched on the issue about cooperation between PCC and the NHS. I think in my, 5 months now since I've been portfolio holder, one of the things that stands out to me the most is the I have to say, excellent working arrangements that we've got between various organisations, PCC, NHS and such like, and that's a real strength, and I'm sure that's duplicated across the country in other areas, but certainly down here it's been a real eye-opener for me. I've been on the council for a long time but never been particularly involved with adult social care, certainly not as a portfolio holder. So today's report highlights another area where I think we've demonstrated that strength between organisations. This will be a positive for us, so I think it's to be welcomed. And if there's any questions, please feel free to ask Andy before you ask me, because he plans to know more than I do. But yeah, no, really good, and I'm glad this is a report that the Cabinet can consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hugh Mason.
Given the changing pattern of mental health treatment, do we have enough accommodation of this type?
Andy?
Thank you, Councillor. I believe we do at the moment. I mean, this is a relatively new scheme and was designed in many ways to be future-proof, if you like, to make sure that we have the capacity for people coming through the service. And it is designed very much to be move-on accommodation. It's not permanent. So I think at the moment, yes. I think the unknown is always going to be the tale of COVID, really, as to how that impacts on our society in the long term, particularly in Portsmouth. We know we're going to see a greater need for people to have support to maintain good mental health, and a proportion of those, albeit a small proportion, we need a lot of support. So I think at the moment, yes, but we need to keep it under review.
Okay, thanks very much. I think, as one of the local councillors in Milton, where this is, I think I very much welcome this. It's good to see the City Council is choosing to continue to use St James's areas around St James's for mental health services. That's what it has always been, and pity that the NHS is not following suit, because that's what it should be for. That's what it was designed for. That was built for. So I think it's good from that point of view. I think the other thing that it's good for is that if we're able to get people out of long-term institutional care and get people back to their local community where they've got friends and family, and where we can provide people support to be able to go to live independently, that's a good thing in terms of people recovering in terms of mental health. But actually it's also a good thing from the council's point of view, because it costs less money, and doing things, working with the NHS in this way, means that we're able to keep an eye on budgets and trying to make sure that we live within our financial means. So, colleagues, are you happy with this report? Thank you very much indeed. We then asked to do exclusion of the press and public. This is just in relation to the confidential appendix. Now, let me see if I can get the exact words that somebody, I hope, has given me, of which bits we wish to need to keep as confidential. I think, Peter, it's Appendix H and Appendix N.
That's correct, Leader.
So, colleagues, could I ask if people are happy to move into exempt discussion in terms of Appendix H and N, but colleagues, if you're not going to refer to the financial numbers in this report, I'd intend to keep the debate in the open session so we can do this in an open and transparent way, but it's important that we do make sure that these appendices remain confidential. Colleagues, are you happy with that? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Andy, you can stay if you like to hear about buses. Andy, I'm not sure you're being completely 100% honest at that point. I'm yeah. Okay, colleagues. National Bus Strategy and the Bus Service Improvement Plan. Peter, thank you very much indeed for coming. Do you want to talk us through this?
Just a couple of minutes. Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, members. The Bus Service Improvement Plan is part of the National Bus Strategy for England, which was published only in March this year. In effect, it's the delivery plan for the Enhanced Partnership for Portsmouth, which was approved by Cabinet on the 22nd of June 2021. The plan is to be ambitious, with measurable targets, and has to be published by the 31st of October 2021. It has to reflect local priorities, and that for Portsmouth follows a citywide consultation which produced responses from over 1,100 individuals and 32 businesses. It has been developed collaboratively with bus operators, residents and user groups, key stakeholders and local businesses. The plan is also, in effect, a bidding document towards the £3 billion of funding announced in that strategy. It is a living document which will be reviewed and updated annually, reflecting experience and further suggestions for improvement. This is an opportunity for buses to support City Council objectives for health, economy, air quality and access to employment, education and training. It supports the Imagine Portsmouth objectives of a green city with excellent air quality and easy travel. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Lynn, Tag, as Cabinet Member, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to put this in context because this is part of a much bigger, it's not a scheme, a set of schemes, much bigger picture for Portsmouth. We need to get cleaner air. We need to reduce the number of vehicles on our roads, and that includes cars in particular, because we have 43,000, I think, vehicle movements into the city each day. If we're going to persuade people to leave their cars behind, not always, because people think that we want to ban cars. We don't, because obviously people do need the cars, but use them less often, then we need to have a good alternative method of transport. And this is where the buses are one of many schemes coming in to improve the passengers' experience, that is in the services that are available, covering much wider areas in the city. Some parts of the city are not served at all by buses. Having them earlier in the day, later at night, so for shift workers, they can catch a bus rather than have to use their cars. The cost that we have, there are a lot of low-cost fares, but they're not very well advertised. The one thing that we want to introduce is the 60-minute hopper. So if, for example, you need to nip into town to go to the bank or something, assuming there are banks left to go into, you don't need to take the car, you can get the bus, and for the same fare, for 60 minutes, you can get in and out on the same fare. And this will, in order for this to happen, we're also using money we had under the South East Hands Rapid Transit Scheme, where we had £56 million allocated, and that's to improve bus lanes, for example, to have bus priority with bus gates, so that when buses come along, they get priority to be able to get through. So that cuts the journeys of people. For example, they should cut the journey from Lee Park into the city centre by 11 minutes. Now that is probably quicker than using a car and going queuing up. So this is part of a much bigger set of solutions to the problems in the city. But I want to hasten to add here and emphasise that this will only work if people use the buses. It's use it or lose it, because the bus companies are not charities. If you don't have reasonably full buses, then they're not going to be making enough money to even support the services, let alone make a profit. So it's going to be put there that the opportunities are going to be there for people. They have to use it, otherwise it won't work.
Okay, thanks, Martini. Councillor Darren Saunders, as a frequent bus user.
That is true, Gerald. Also, as the person overseeing council housing, many low-income people live in our council homes, and I think they would welcome this strategy as I do. I think it's an important first step in trying to get more people onto the buses. Not enough people use buses in our city. I'm particularly interested in the way it's actually biased towards improving the low-income families who are facing the cost of living crisis, and that is one way forwards. I would certainly want us to go much further with the sort of regimes that we have in London or in Greater Manchester, but that's not on offer, so I think this is an important first step. I would also stress it's not purely people in council homes who are out of reach. In my own ward of Baffins, for instance, we've got about 1,000 people who are nowhere near a bus stop. And I've certainly asked the bus companies to see whether that can be rectified, as well as giving us access to the Ocean Park shopping centre up in Copner, which I think will help. You and I both know, leader, of the angst in Milton around the 13 and 14 bus, which people want boosted. I know I've asked the bus companies to help boost that. I hope the government will be able to fund those things in our wards as well as across the rest of the city. So it's an excellent first step. I'd love it to go much, much further. That's not on offer, but it's a very good proposal to back the vision Lynn has outlined. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, anybody else? No? Okay, colleagues, are you happy with this report to go forward? Thank you very much indeed. That brings us to the end of this meeting. Thank you for your time. I think, Anna, we can push the button to say the meeting has now finished. Thank you, colleagues.